This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
It's Golden Sense in full flight for the wire over flashback, and Golden Sense have won the Santa Anita Derby.
Orb have won the Kentucky Derby. Forced to Kentucky will take charge is surging, and it's a photo finish. It's too close to call.
And Animal Kingdom wins the Dubai World Cup.
Macho Man!
Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America on this Wednesday morning. I'm Seth Merrow. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in a few moments, we'll be joined with Jeremy Plonk, HorsePlayerNow.com, and Countdown to the Crown. We will take a look back at some of the three-year-old action from this past weekend, get Jeremy's thoughts. Coming up a little bit after that, Jim Miller from Hawthorne. We'll get some of his thoughts on Hawthorne for this afternoon. Also, some three-year-old thoughts from him, because coming up this weekend at Hawthorne, it's the Illinois Derby, which this year may actually have some Kentucky Derby implications as well, with Bob Baffert saying Midnight Hawk headed to the Illinois Derby, and subsequently has not ruled off a start in the Kentucky Derby. We'd only be a couple of weeks out, and you would think the way trainers train in the year 2014, Kentucky Derby would not be on most trainers' mind. But again, Bob Baffert has not ruled out the possibility of Midnight Hawk moving on after this weekend. So again, we'll talk with Jim Miller a little bit. And they won't pull the entries for that until later today, but we'll get kind of an early preview on the Illinois Derby from Jim Miller. All of that coming up in a few. Steve Haskin has put out his latest Derby dozen. There were some interesting notes on it. He has California Chrome at number one. His comment is, yes, his speed and overall brilliance has been established, but his mind plays a huge part in his success. He has a wonderful relationship with people and knows exactly what he has to do, whether racing or training. So, like a lot of the pundits, Haskin has California Chrome on top. Has for a couple of weeks now, a few weeks, I think. Opportunity is in the second spot for Haskin. Comment underneath, it's not every day you can collect $200,000 for a workout. That's pretty much what Baffert and Opportunity's owners did when the colt ran second in the Santa Anita Derby without raising much of a sweat. Those are horses that have made my top 10. Wicked Strong is in the number 3 spot for Haskin. He says it's hard not to root for a Jerkins family Derby victory. I think that will be a sentiment a lot of people will have. He has Constitution at number 4. And interesting, he has Danza sitting at number 5. And he says, yes, like everyone else, my first thought was, where the heck did that come from? Referring to this weekend's Arkansas Derby victory. But he says, visually, I love his action, the way he drops his shoulder and the reach and the efficiency of his stride. Danza popped into the top 5 on my list as well. Makes number 5 for Haskin. I think Danza is kind of interesting. As I said a couple of times already this week, a horse that could be getting good at the right time. Number 6 on Haskin's list is General A-Rod. This colt continues to intrigue me, says Haskin. And then another interesting one on the list, as far as I'm concerned, Cairo Prince. Haskin says, now that the dust of the Florida Derby is settled and he is in the top 20, I am moving him up. And that's exactly what I did this week. I had him sitting down kind of towards the bottom of my top 10. I moved him up to number 10 on my top 10 list this week. I think Cairo Prince is very, very interesting. So it's interesting to see Haskin. And that was just my feeling as well. Now that the dust is settled, we've gone through the major preps. He has the points. We've had a look at some of the other contenders and what they did in the last series of preps. Cairo Prince, to me, became a little more interesting. So moved up to number 2 on my list, moved into the number 7 spot, but moved up for Haskin as well. The number 1 horse on my list, and again, this is just one of those years. I don't put him on top with a whole lot of confidence, but I have Intense Holiday on top of my list. Haskin has him at number 8. And the comment is, I've been waiting to see his first work since the Louisiana Derby, and he did everything right working a half in 48-4 at Palmettos in company with We Miss Artie. So Haskins' top 10 was interesting to me. He completes it with Samrat, Right on Curlin, Candy Boy, and Vickers in Trouble. And again, that's his Derby dozen. He has some horses knocking at the door. He puts Dance with Fate in the knocking at the door category. Medal Count also in there. Pablo Del Monte, Ring Weekend, Commanding Curve, Vincent Ramos, Uncle Si. He has Tapiture on his knocking at the door category. Tapiture for me, I moved down to I think it was 7 or 8 on my list this week, and I'm a little dicey on that situation. So we'll see. But again, it was interesting kind of comparing notes a little bit with what Haskin had and what I did. And as I say, I found it particularly interesting that he moved Cairo Prince up. I did as well. And it was all based on the fact that letting the dust settle, does he get enough points? What are the other horses? And just nobody stepped up over this past weekend and took any stranglehold on, much less the top spot, even the second spot. I think California Chrome is solidly, not on my list, but you look, and he's solidly at the top as far as Derby favoritism right now. But below that, it starts to get a little bit dicey. Always also like to look at the Watchmaker watch lists. Mike Watchmaker from the Daily Racing Forum every week, and it came out a couple of days ago, updated the weekly divisional ratings where he takes a look at all the categories, all the Eclipse categories, and lists his top 10. Just wanted to take a look at the older males this week, given what Wise Dan and Will Take Charge did over the past week. Wise Dan still sits at number 1 on the Watchmaker older males list. Game on Dude 2, Leah 3rd, and Will Take Charge 4. So it's Wise Dan, Game on Dude, Leah, Will Take Charge in the top 4 spots, and they didn't juggle up off of the weekend, which wasn't a surprise. I mean, I think the horses, he's got them highly rated, and they ran to those ratings, so he really couldn't juggle them up. Game on Dude, of course, will be back in action this coming Saturday down at Charlestown. 3-year-old male side, California Chrome, again, top of Watchmaker's list, top of a lot of lists. Opportunity moves up a spot to number 3. Opportunity moves up to number 2 from number 3. Wicked Strong, number 3 from number 4. Constitution, 4 from 5. Danza appears on the list at number 7. The horse that took the hit this week to move these horses up was Tapiture, who moved from number 2 last week to number 6. So again, Tapiture stayed on my top 10, stayed on Watchmaker's top 10 as well. Danza moved on to mine. Danza moves on to his. He, however, does not have Cairo Prince in his mix. The rest of his top 10, Wildcat Red 5, Tapiture 6, Danza, Samrat, Social Inclusion, and Vickers in Trouble. On the 3-year-old girl side, Untappable on top. And I'm just looking if anything that happened this weekend. I don't see anything that shook up his list as far as the 3-year-old female. So there's the Watchmaker watch list. And again, California Chrome, if you look at the pundits lists over the past few days, California Chrome certainly going to be the favorite as they go to the Kentucky Derby. Again, we have to look at the workouts as they get closer. That's going to affect things a little bit and see if there are any dings and who actually makes it into the gate. There are a couple of sitting there. Certainly, the most notable bubble horse outside the top 20 right now is Uncle Si. I think he'll probably get in because there are horses on the fence about running. You also have to think there will be a ding or two that'll send somebody to the sideline. So I think Uncle Si will get in. But over the next couple of weeks, that'll all get sorted out. Also getting sorted out, the yearly jockey musical chairs heading to the Kentucky Derby. And speaking of Tapiture, Ricardo Santana will be on board. Santana, of course, has ridden Tapiture previously, rode him to victory in the Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill last year. This year's Southwest Stakes at Oaklawn, also in the Rebel. Rode him to a second-place finish, but was replaced by Joel Rosario in the Arkansas Derby. However, Rosario chose to ride General A-Rod, made that decision yesterday. So Rosario will go to General A-Rod. Ricardo Santana back on board Tapiture again as the jockey musical chairs getting underway. Also in that mix, Rafael Bejarano will be on board Wildcat Red in the Kentucky Derby. His trainer Jose Garofalo said, we tried to get Luis Saez, who won on him in the Fountain of Youth, but Saez committed to Cairo Prince. No change there. That's not a shock. Gary Stevens was also an option, but Gary Stevens will be staying with Candy Boy. So again, there are a couple of jockeys who are with horses they've already been with. Javier Castellano in this Racing Form article is said to be committed to Constitution. John Velasquez has been named on Intense Holiday. So things are kind of sorting out. The big name jockeys are making their selections, which are opening some of the other horses up. And other big name jockeys are stepping in, like Rafael Bejarano. But Ricardo Santana, who certainly is a main guy for Steve Asmussen, but clearly on the national scene, I don't think you think of him in the upper tier. But I think he has such a relationship with Asmussen and the horse Tapiture, he was probably a logical choice to go to when they needed to fill in there for Joel Rosario. Shared Belief, last year's 2-year-old Eclipse champion, has gotten back to work for Jerry Hollendorfer. Yesterday at Golden Gate, Hollendorfer put in a workout of 38.40 over the Golden Gate Tapeta surface. Hollendorfer said he worked with Russell Bays up and went real nice. Shared Belief has been on the sidelines with a little bit of a foot issue that eventually became a quarter crack. That you could kind of see it coming as it went longer and longer without him having a workout, and eventually, a month or so ago, they made it official that they weren't going to make the Kentucky Derby. At this point, really don't know where the horse will go next. Hollendorfer said he's kind of relieved that the horse is back and working. Hollendorfer says he's going to get several works into him, and then they'll start looking for a place to run. Hollendorfer, interestingly, is inclined to keep Shared Belief up at Golden Gate. He thinks the horse does perhaps a little bit better on that Tapeta synthetic surface. So Shared Belief, again, at least back and working, got into work, wasn't a blazing fast work, 38.40, but certainly now that he's back and working, we can at least begin tentatively a countdown to see him back. And, top horse like that, 2-year-old of the year last year, hopefully he'll get back, will maintain that talent level, and will be a player on the 3-year-old scene as we get into, summertime. You would think June, July, maybe we'll start to see him. And as I say, some of these 3-year-old races as we get into the summer and certainly in the fall. Game On Dude has arrived at Charlestown for the Charlestown Classic. Interesting, he hopped on a plane out of Southern California with 19 horses, but subsequently they stopped in Kentucky. Many of those horses got off in Kentucky, but getting on in Kentucky, Marino. Also on board the plane and staying on board the plane from Southern California, Clubhouse Ride. Game On Dude won the Charlestown Classic last year. Clubhouse Ride ran second. They're both headed back. And as I say, Marino joined them in Kentucky for the trip down to Charlestown. So Marino, who missed the Oaklawn Handicap this past weekend, will be headed to the Charlestown Classic on Saturday. The entries for the Charlestown Classic will be drawn today. We'll know a little bit more about that probably by today, definitely by tomorrow's show, and give you a little update on what the field will look like down at Charlestown for the $1.5 million Charlestown Classic. Game On Dude clearly going to be the favorite in there to repeat. Just wanted to give you some numbers. What are we, about halfway through the Keeneland meet. Just give you a look at the leaders, the trainer and jockey standings right now. On the trainer side, again, about halfway through the meet. The meet started on April 4th, ends on April 25th. The leading jockey right now, Julien Leparoux, 12 wins so far at this Keeneland meet. Leparoux leads Stuart Elliott by 4. Stuart Elliott with 8 wins, second at the Keeneland meet. Percentage-wise, doing very well. 8 for 33 is Stuart Elliott. Stuart Elliott has been racing at Parks for, the past few years now. But it was noted that he's going to make his home base of operations, at least for a while, Kentucky, starting that sojourn down to the Bluegrass State with a move to Keeneland at this meet, and got off to a really nice start. So again, Stuart Elliott, interesting, second at the Keeneland meet, running in the third spot. Javier Castellano was 7. So the win totals, Leipero 12, Stuart Elliott 8, Castellano 7. And again, we're about halfway through right now. On the trainer side, obviously things at short meets are a little more competitive, typically really for jockeys and trainers, but particularly for trainers just because of the numbers of starts. On the training side, there is a tie right now at the top. Ken McPeak with 5, tied with Mark Casse also with 5. Wesley Ward with 4. Chad Brown with 3. Christophe Clement with 3. Graham Motion with 3. So we're halfway through the meet. Things haven't really sorted out right now. I think any of these guys, really, if anybody even got on a little bit of a run from behind, they could make a nice move too. Again, the leaders are tied up at the top, McPeak and Casse both with 5. So it's tight at the top on the trainer side. On the jockey side, I just find it kind of interesting. Julian Leipero, as I say, sitting number 1, but Stuart Elliott, number 2 at the Keeneland meet so far. All right, we'll head into our first break. When we come back, Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com, and Countdown to the Crown. A little review of the weekend, 3-year-old action right after this.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right. The 2014 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2015 Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month's contest is the Triple Threat on May 10th. So sign up today, online at CapitalOTB.com, or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. With a newly designed and engineered internet wagering platform, enhanced video streaming, additional funding options, and 3 new individual wagering opportunities, CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. Combine that with our all-new mobile website. You have 2 of the most powerful, innovative, and advanced wagering platforms available today. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
It's called the fastest 2 minutes in sports, and the tradition continues Saturday, May 3rd with the 140th running of the Kentucky Derby. If you can't make it to the Clubhouse Racebook in Albany, you can still be a part of the action by visiting one of our many Easy Bet or branch locations conveniently located throughout upstate New York. For a complete list of our Easy Bet and branch locations, log on to CapitalOTB.com. Capital OTB and CapitalOTBBet.com. The most convenient ways to wager on all the Triple Crown races.
I'm Anthony Mormino. Join me weekdays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the day in racing. That's the Handicappers Report, weekdays at 9, only on the OTB TV network.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Wednesday morning. Happy to be joined now, as we are every Wednesday, by Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com, Countdown to the Crown, and of course, Night School. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Seth. Great to be with you.
And always happy to have you with us because, of course, again, I'll tout Countdown to the Crown package. If people go to horseplayernow.com on Friday, the Countdown to the Crown package is updated. A lot of great information on the Derby Trail, reviews of stakes races, previews of upcoming races. That's every Friday. You can go right to horseplayernow.com and pick up Jeremy's Countdown to the Crown. You said you're also adding Countdown to the Queen's Plate as well. So for our folks who are fans of racing north of the border, that'll be a nice addition. And Jeremy, talking just during the break, you mentioned that speaking of the 3-year-old trail, Countdown to the Crown, there was a little news that has come out since I've been on the air this morning.
Yeah, Jay Pridman of Daily Racing Form tweeted it out, and WinStar Farm issued a press release on it that Constitution will be out of the Triple Crown scene with the leg fracture after his workout over the weekend. So we've lost one of the big players. The Florida Derby winner is now off the trail, and really the repercussions here, as we look at some of these horses who may drop by the wayside, they really have tremendous pace implications on this year's Kentucky Derby, because some of these horses sitting perilously outside of the top 20 right now, Pablo Del Monte, Bayern, Social Inclusion. If these horses come up and move into the race, you are talking about a serious difference in the early pace of this year's Kentucky Derby. So if you're handicapping this race for pace right now, I'd say wait a little bit because it could really change.
Yeah, and I, talked a little bit over the past couple of days looking at the current leaderboard. This gets Uncle Si in. Uncle Si was sitting at number 21, so with Constitution out, he is definitely in the mix now with 24 points. Vincent Ramos, then Harry's Holiday, Commanding Curve, Pablo Del Monte, Bayern, and Social Inclusion are the list. Social Inclusion had been at 27. Now we'll move up to 26. There was already 3 or 4 horses that were kind of on the fence, including the Bluegrass winner, who we'll talk about in a moment. So as you say, we got 3 weeks. Some of these horses on the fence, they may move off the fence and out of the Derby picture, maybe another ding or two. Things could certainly shake up significantly given the leaderboard right now. And as you say, some of the horses that are on the bubble. We'll keep our attention to that. And Jeremy, before we get to some of the weekend 3-year-old races, as always, like to update people, if they want to pull up the archive from Tuesday night's night school session. I promoted it yesterday on the show, and I have not listened yet, but I got to pull it up because I think money management is a great topic. To me, there's 2 sides of playing the game. There's the handicapping and then the betting, and of course, money management. That's what the wagering is all about. And you had a couple of nice guests on yesterday. Give us a little recap of the night school session from last night.
Well, the archives are up and running now. You can listen to it on your computer or your iPhone or iPad. The archives are up for both formats now. If you go to horseplayernow.com, click on the night school, open up last night's chat. The very first entry will take you to the links of the audio file. We had a radio simulcast last night on Sirius with Steve Fick's show, and our guests were Duke Matisse, the professional player from up your way, a northern New York guy, a Saratoga area guy now relocated to Las Vegas, and one of the absolute best tournament players in the country, but a heavyweight, a guy who admits he plays at a high level. He's a whale who gets rebates, and he talks about the impact of rebates, takeouts, hot streaks, cold streaks, how to manage those. A very informative and forthright interview with Duke Matisse last night. Also, we had Barry Meadow, who wrote really the handbook in money management, the book Money Secrets at the Racetrack, published back in 2000. Really has been the best article or best book collection that we've seen on the topic. And Barry himself, a serious player of horses, of cards, and of the casino gambling as well, really understands the numbers and leveraging the odds. And last night he was very exceptional as a guest, and also jumped in the chat a little bit and took questions after he was off the air. So a nice performance by 2 really educated guests last night, and I think you can learn a lot from it. We also had a roundtable discussion with myself, Kate and Bradar, and Steve Fick, and talked about our personal approaches to money management. So there's a lot to learn. We talk about it being half of the game. It's half handicapping, half money management. But the longer I play the races and the more I'm around it, I think it's closer to 80 or 85% of the game. A lot of us can handicap in a similar skill level, pick 20 to 30% winners. It's what you do with them and how you leverage the odds and your money, and when you strike and when you take back that's most important. So a lot of that was discussed last night. It's a great listen, and I think something that will hold up, time-tested. I think it's something, even if you don't get to this week, if you get around to it a month from now, it'll be very helpful.
Yeah, as I said, I think money management, a very, very important part of the game, and a lot of times, we spend so much time educating ourselves on how to handicap. I don't think a lot of us pay a lot of attention to educating ourselves on that portion of the game. So a very again, pertinent topic if folks want to improve their play at the racetrack. And as you say, you had a couple of nice guests, and certainly as upstate New York, you're right. The Matisse boys, we got to be clued into them, not only on the playing side, but on the training side as well. They can get it done over there, and we're certainly familiar with that family. All right, Jeremy, let's shift our attention now to the 3-year-old picture from this past weekend. Nice little mix. We have a couple of big stakes races, maybe a secondary stakes race. They could have a secondary kind of derby, those second-string derby players. One of those could have come out of the weekend. And then I pulled up a maiden race that I just found a little bit intriguing as well. But let's kick things off looking at Keeneland on the weekend. The Grade 1, $750,000 Bluegrass, 1 1/8 miles. We're going to watch the stretch run here. See number 8, Dance with Fate, get it done. Hats off to Dale Romans taking the shot, coming right back with Medal Count, gets Medal Count into the Kentucky Derby. I'll tell you, Jeremy, coming out of this race, I said it, between the 2 races on the weekend, far more intriguing for me was the Arkansas Derby. I'm not quite sure what to make of these horses coming out of the Bluegrass. And, gee, it seems like the connections of the top, the winner here, they aren't sure what to make of it either.
Well, it was a real situational kind of race. I mean, there was a fast-paced Pablo Del Monte, who you saw in the lead there. set wicked fractions. 47-2 over this racetrack was very fast, and we've seen in the past when the Bluegrass Stakes goes in 48 or under for the half, the closers dominate, and it's exactly how it played out on paper. Dance with Fate blew by him and looked good in victory, but it was a good race shape for him. Medal Count, again, took advantage of a nice pace setup. Hats off to Pablo Del Monte. He ends up running third in here. If you flip this field upside down, I mean, the horses at the half-mile call were 10th, 9th, 11th, 13th, 12th, and 14th. That ran throughout the top 6. The only horse who lived to talk about it was Pablo Del Monte, so he ran a good race in defeat. And I know Wesley Ward has been openly talking about he hopes he gets into the Kentucky Derby with Pablo Del Monte, who would really change the pace dynamic of the Derby. He may be the fastest of the fast horses in terms of the pace for the Derby. Medal Count came back on those 8 days rest like you're talking about. I thought he finished well. He looked good. Dale Romans is confident in this horse. The last time I heard Dale talk about a horse with this kind of confidence, it was Shackelford when a lot of folks were down on him. And then you remember he popped a really good effort in the Florida Derby at a big price, got his way into the Kentucky Derby where he ran fourth, ended up winning the Preakness. So Dale holds Medal Count in high regard, and I think he's probably the best Triple Crown prospect of these horses out of the Bluegrass. Dance with Fate, he was solid, on dirt last year. You forget he was the beaten favorite, ran a good second in the Grade 1 front runner in the prep race for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So he's run well on dirt. The connections are kind of hemming and hawing like they may not go to the Kentucky Derby. They're not the kind of folks who point to the Derby. Peter Urton, the trainer's not a guy who, his barn is based on winning the Kentucky Derby. It's not that kind of operation. And I can see having a horse like that by saying, look, guys, I think we're going to be 1-5 for the swaps. Why don't we kind of point towards something like that on the West Coast and point towards the big races at Del Mar and have a better horse for that, if that's your kind of operation. But Derby fever tends to get most folks, and I would guess that Dance with Fate will end up in the starting gate for the Derby. He belongs because I know he can get the distance. He's got a dirt pedigree. He's run well on the dirt. He's one of the 20 best 3-year-olds based on this performance that are still standing at this point in time. So I would have no argument if he went on to the Derby. I'm not sure I would play him, as a major contender. I think Medal Count's probably the more intriguing of this group.
Yeah, and the disappointment, of course, in here was the 7-2 favorite, Bobby's Kitten, finishing 12th in a field of 14, but may have just kind of validated the fact that he's more of a turf horse.
And he's a miler. I mean, look, circle that big race at Penn National, that Penn Mile that they created last year. This horse is 4-5 in the Penn Mile for $500,000 or $400,000, whatever that purse is. I mean, he'll run, I believe that's the week after the Belmont Stakes. Timing would be pretty good for him. And Bobby's Kitten's going to win a race like that. I mean, he's a really good turf miler.
All right, let's shift our attention now to the Arkansas Derby. And as I say, between the two big 3-year-old races on the weekend, this to me was the more intriguing of the two. Now, coming in, I was hoping Tapiture and Conquest Titan might validate what we saw from them earlier. They wind up finishing 4th and 5th in here and disappointing a little bit. Commissioner runs 6th. Danza, the number 1 horse, surprises. Joe Bravo on board. Todd Pletcher trains. Right on Curlin runs 2nd. Bayern, a little bit of a disappointment, running 3rd at 8-5 for Bob Baffert and Gary Stevens. But again, we'll see Danza with a very impressive effort here at 41-1. And I'll tell you, Jeremy, I find Danza kind of interesting coming out of this race. Lightly raced, but does have a little bit of a 2-year-old foundation, so won't be bucking that trend, and just could be getting right at the right time. I'm looking at your top 20 list from the Louisville Courier-Journal this past week, and you have Danza hitting your list now at number 8, so I guess you were impressed a little bit by the performance as well.
Yeah, you can't help but look at the result and say, wow, this was pretty good, I mean, the horse went less than a length slower than Will Take Charge, actually came home faster the final 1/8 of a mile, 2 lengths faster the final 1/8 of a mile than Will Take Charge did in Oaklawn Handicap, the race right before this. So you can't look at that and say, look, this was impressive. He beat horses who we think are pretty good, We think Bayern is pretty good. We know Tapiture's pretty good. He's a multiple graded stakes winner. So this was a pretty good field. I mean, is it the greatest Arkansas Derby field we've ever seen? No, but he did it in a fast time. He did it legitimately, and he was drawing off on the back end. So you have to leave the race with a positive impression of the horse. Now, did you come into the race with any inkling at all that this was going to happen? No. And I think what was kind of interesting about this is, I'm writing about it in my countdown recap already for Friday, but not only is this horse 41-1, Seth, it's only an 8-horse field, so 41-1 is a big price, you know. I mean, a huge price in an 8-horse field. There's a 55-1 in the field that's taking none of the percentage of the pari-mutuel wagering. And the sixth favorite in the race is 10-1. So this horse is 31 points higher than the sixth favorite. I mean, you know, it just wasn't a handful of people dismissing Danza. It was just an outright non-belief by anybody going into it. And Joe Bravo, being the named rider, tells you that I don't think the connections thought that this was the horse either. I mean, they went out and got Mike Smith for commissioner. Last year when they won the race with Overanalyze, they went and got Rafael Bejarano. You know, Velazquez and Castellano were riding at Keeneland for $750,000 and not out there riding for Pletcher for $1 million. So, you know, this horse was way down on the pecking order even within the barn. But if things turn out, strange things happen in racing, and they did Saturday.
Yeah, and I said when I came in here and talked on Monday a little bit, I said I looked up at the board, no great handicapping, and I didn't make a score you could retire on, but I looked up and it was Pletcher in a Derby Trail race at 41-1. I put $2 on the horse.
Good for you.
Well, like I say, there was no genius there other than, seems like Pletcher every year has one crazy one win along the Derby Trail. So at 41-1, I took the slightest of shots, but it wound up being a little bit worthwhile and was kind of fun. And as I say, going forward, I find him kind of interesting. Touch on one more in here. Of course, as I say, Bayern, a disappointment running third for Baffert, but really disappointing, of course, was Strong Mandate running last in the field of 8.
Yeah, Strong Mandate, there's something wrong with him. I mean, it just has to be. I mean, it may not be overt where, you know, it's obvious what it is, but there's something bugging that horse. He's better than this. You can say, I didn't ever think he was a 1.25 mile horse based on his running style. That's fine, but he didn't run it all in this race. And in a 1.8 mile, stopping, you know, and getting beat 21.5 lengths, he's better than that. He's got pedigree to route. There's a reason why he's not finishing his races, and there's a reason why he threw it in the tank here. The shine has come off the apple. There's something wrong with him, obviously. You know, will Lucas give him the time to kind of recalibrate and find out what he's got? You know, he's already a Grade 1 winner. As a 2-year-old, he's worth a lot at stud. You know, if Strong Mandate runs in any of the Triple Crown races from here, it's probably not the best move. And so, you know, I'm hoping that we've seen the last of him for the trail at this point. You know, he was obviously great at Saratoga last year. He's obviously a very talented horse. I picked him number 1 in the entire country. I had the number 1 pick in the Media Fantasy League with, I believe there's 15 of us in different media outlets that take part in this fantasy league. Because I thought he would run in 3 prep races at the time and all 3 legs of the Triple Crown, being Lucas. And I thought you get 6 shots to score points with him, and he's a solid horse. I made him the number 1 overall pick in the fantasy draft. So I've thought a lot of him, but I don't anymore. And so, you know, sometimes you just have to kind of tuck your tail and say you either misread one or there's something wrong with him. And I think this horse is going to need some time off. Maybe he comes back and he's a factor at Saratoga in the summer. And
again, it is a Lucas horse, so he likes to go to all the dances. But maybe it's a good factor going against him, but it'll work for him. He clearly doesn't have enough points, so he's not going to be in the Derby, no matter what they feel about him. So that, as I say, that may work for him over the long run. All right. Let's look on the undercard of that Arkansas Derby day. Typically, a lot of tracks, these big 3-year-old days, they'll have a secondary 3-year-old stakes race and then maybe some maiden or allowances. They're also a little bit interesting. We're going to take a look in both of those categories. A little earlier on the card, $100,000 Northern Spur going a mile on the dirt. We're going to watch the number 2 Bourbonize just get up here over Knock'em Flat. Knock'em Flat was the 7-5 favorite, and I think a lot of that was the fact that off of the maiden victory, this horse was cross-entered in the Arkansas Derby. So I think people thought picking this spot, Knock'em Flat may have a little bit of an edge. 7-5 looks short to me on Knock'em Flat, but Knock'em Flat runs well. However, Bourbonize, as we see here, coming on the outside, just gets up and lives up to what was the promise shown early in the career with a maiden victory in the debut at Churchill last November, the allowance win in the second career start at Oaklawn, then tossed in a couple of duds, Southwest and Sunland Derby, but comes back again in this secondary stakes race. I'm not quite sure what was behind him. As I say, I Knock'em Flat at 7-5 seemed like a short price coming out of a maiden victory. So again, this may not have been a strong field, but Bourbonize showed a little promise early in the year. Now gets a stakes race on the resume. This, to me, looks like a horse that may be a little bit of a player in some of those second-string derbies this year.
Yeah, I would say you look at a race in August like the West Virginia Derby.
Yeah.
Kellen Gorder shipped a lot of horses to Mountaineer to run even on weeknights. So it's a track that he supports. This horse really fits in that kind of race. I would say at a big money date and like something like the West Virginia Derby would be the big career goal for the 3-year-old season for Bourbonized, and then see where he ends up from there. You know, maybe a Super Derby or something like that, you know, later in the year then. Or Oklahoma Derby, something like that later in the year. I think he's the kind of player in those type of races. But certainly the first main goal for him, I think you circle and work towards, would be that race at Mountaineer in the West Virginia Derby.
And again, that looks like where he would be interesting, these kind of second string kind of derbies. And so he had that promise early in the career, maybe validated. We'll see. Next time out, we'll get a better line on him, I think. All right, one more race I wanted to look at Oaklawn. As I say, a lot of times on these big days, they'll have some interesting allowance or maiden specials that clearly we're not looking at Derby contenders because it's too late in the calendar, but 3-year-olds that might be interesting a little bit later on. And I wanted to get your opinion. Maiden special weight event, race 7 on that Saturday card. These are 3-year-olds and up, going 1 mile and 3/16. And Wizardly, a 3-year-old for Steve Asmussen and Winchell. Obviously connections that have done very well on the 3-year-old side, boys and girls this year. Wizardly making the 7th start of the career. Last 3 starts prior were second place finishes, all at Oaklawn. Obviously, this is a horse that if it took 7 to break the maiden, we're not talking superstar necessarily, but I wanted to get your opinion just because, again, potent connections, elusive quality on top. The dam is distinctively, the dam comes out of a nice Phipps family. The Grand Dam Heavenly Prize, that makes distinctively a sibling to Pure Prize, Good Reward. So I think there's some interesting breeding here. And boy, does Wizardly live up to that breeding in the 7th career start. So I don't know, did the light bulb just go on? Do you think this is a 3-year-old that could be a little bit interesting moving on?
Yeah, you know, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about that pedigree and the promise that it shows. And I call these kind of horses the old nibbler breaks out angle, a horse who's kind of nibbled around into minor placings. And then when they finally do it, they blow off and win like this. I mean, this is a visually very impressive race. I think where you're going to see this horse effective is something like the Matt Winn at Churchill on the undercard for the Stephen Foster. It's a 1 mile and a 16th race. We'll get a lot of the second cusp kind of 3-year-olds who weren't Derby quite material, or the middle distance type horses who weren't 1 mile and a quarter types impressed on. I think that fits well. Steve Asmussen obviously is going to support the program strongly at Churchill Downs, as he always does. And I think you could see a horse like Wizardly be effective in that race. Now, if you're effective in that race, then you kind of start to look at those fun summer races. You know, is this something for the Haskell, the Jim Dandy, and those kind of races moving forward from that point forward? Or do you kind of start peeling back if you're not dominant in a race like the Matt Winn and start looking at some of that lower hanging fruit, like some of those races we've already talked about? A lot of good purse money out there for the 3-year-olds to get throughout the year. There's no rush ever to go take on the older horses. When you have a good 3-year-old, there's a lot of money to be made. So, you know, I think Wizardly is the kind of horse who's very interesting because of that pedigree, the way he broke out and won here. These horses often pair up victories, in my estimation, as horses who win dominantly after kind of nibbling around and they finally have that breakout win. They're good plays back, but sometimes they'll be a little undervalued because that big win margin often affects people in the betting, like we saw with Knock'em Flat, probably overbet a little bit off of that big maiden win because those margins tend to exaggerate bettors' confidence.
Yeah, again, not flashy on the record necessarily, but when he finally broke through, he was kind of flashy. So Wizardly, to me, interesting off of that win on Saturday. So we'll keep our eyes on him going forward as well. And Jeremy, before I let you go, obviously, typically, we have you in here with the Countdown to the Crown package talking about 3-year-olds, but boy, the various divisions are shaping up to be fun this year all around. We talked about it earlier this week with Princess of Silmar last week. Also closed hatches this coming Sunday. Beholder, that Ogden Phipps for the older fillies and mares at Belmont is shaping up very nice. The 3-year-old division, which we've been talking about all year long, is just kind of fun. California Chrome is really the only one that I think has a consensus behind them, but it's turning out to be a fun division. But boy, the older division overall, and I wanted to get some of your thoughts on what we saw over this past week. While we talk, we're going to go back to that Maker's Mile on Friday at Keeneland. We're going to see Wise Dan, the 2-time Horse of the Year, win in his 2014 seasonal debut. It doesn't win by a big margin, but I think the first start of the year, John Velasquez kind of knew he had it in the can and was maybe gearing down a little bit. Kagan makes a nice late run, but I think Wiesdan had this all the way. So it was a nice return to the races for him, and a little bit of a controversial finish perhaps for Will Take Charge. I would have tilted maybe slightly for taking down Will Take Charge, although I have no argument with them keeping the horse up. But off of the first 2 races this year, folks were all thinking Will Take Charge had a stakes race sitting on the plate right in front of him and finally got his first stakes victory in 2014. A couple of nice additions to the handicap division this year.
It is. You know, you talked about those 4-year-old fillies, how good that division is. You've got Wiesdan among the turf milers and potentially in the open third handicap division. Will Take Charge, obviously. Game On Dude going this weekend in the Charlestown Classic. If ever they say timing is everything, timing is very, very good for the new Belmont Stakes Day program. I got to tell you, NYRA is sitting on what they're calling, you know, the Breeders' Cup of the spring, and they couldn't have a better group of older horses around in racing, running early in the year, and could just set up an absolute bonanza kind of race day in June. You know, we're talking about how great the fields look right now in each division and how good the older horses are and the turf horses and the milers and the distaffers and everything like that. Try keeping that division together all the way until the Breeders' Cup at the end of October, the beginning of November. That's difficult to do. So the timing of this big mega stakes day on Belmont Stakes Day could just absolutely work brilliantly. And I was a little bit like when they first announced it. Well, it's Belmont Day. It's already it is what it is already. I'm not sure how much better or more glamorous you're going to make it. But with the horses who are around and the pool of eligibles they have that might be able to draw into it, it really could be a pretty interesting Breeders' Cup precursor in the late spring, early summer, and something that we're really excited to see. Is it going to do a lot for the growth of the sport and the attention of the sport? Probably not. This is more for racing folks, I think, that undercard. And the Belmont Stakes itself will still be predicated on whether or not we have a Triple Crown on the line.
Yeah, that's interesting. You make a great point because I didn't throw Palace Malice into the mix. He's got the prep coming up for that big day at Belmont and choosing where he's going to go. You're right, that day in New York could shape up to be very, very nice, and it is all about the timing as well. Run them while they're good, and they're getting good right now, and they're out there and they're racing. Jeremy, as always, we appreciate the visit. Again, if folks want to check out your Countdown to the Crown package, comes out every Friday. Go to horseplayernow.com. Also, check out horseplayernow.com to pick up the Night School archive from last night about money management. Jeremy, as always, appreciate the visit, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com. We'll take our next break. When we come back, Jim Miller from Hawthorne. We'll talk Hawthorne for this afternoon. Also, look out, speaking of 3-year-olds, Illinois Derby this Saturday at Hawthorne. Stay tuned.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night School, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Cassano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network.
Funding your Capital OTB bet account is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Easy Money. Clearly the fastest and easiest method of depositing funds into your account. Make deposits or withdrawals in just minutes. 2. Green Dot Money Pack. Gives you instant access to your funds. Green Dot Money Packs are available at thousands of retailers nationwide. And 3. MasterCard Visa. Simply click on the link from the funding page, enter your account information, and fund your account. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
It's called the fastest 2 minutes in sports, and the tradition continues Saturday, May 3rd with the 140th running of the Kentucky Derby. And there's only one place to watch it, the Clubhouse Racebook. To be a part of the excitement, reserve your seat today by calling 446-4010.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Wednesday morning. Happy to be joined now by Jim Miller of Hawthorne. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Seth. How are you today?
Very good. And we're going to get some of your thoughts for this afternoon at Hawthorne, and then also look out at what is shaping up to be a very big weekend out your way. Before we do that, though, for folks who are going to play Hawthorne today, what's the weather look like?
Well, actually, it's not too bad today. It was interesting, though. We had about 1.5 inches of snow a couple days ago, so I know you guys were dealing with that, too. So it has melted, but we're off the turf today. I do expect we'll be on the turf on Saturday, though, for Illinois Derby Day. But temperatures in the 50s, fast main track, everything on the main track. And really, it's interesting because with the early scratches, race 4, which was on the turf, came off and scratched down to 6 horses. But our other race on the turf, the 7th, everything held together. Every horse stays in as of now. So pretty good card for Wednesday afternoon.
All right, we like that. And, yeah, we have dealt with the return of winter today. Hopefully that is a short-lived, because I tell you, it was a long winter, and over the weekend we had some summer-like temperatures. There were smiles, and everybody was in a good mood, and it changed quickly.
Well, and you look at it here. I mean, we moved into 3rd overall for record snowfall in Chicago, over 80 inches for the winter. So you know how bad it's been around here.
Yeah, it's been a crazy winter, and really has affected racing all across the country. It's been a funny winter. You think of it in the Northeast and out your way, but we've had cancellations up here. They had cancellations due to rain down at Fairgrounds and out at Los Alamitos in California. Really a very funny winter weather-wise. So hopefully things are on the rebound and ready to turn around. Let's take a look this afternoon at Hawthorne. We'll kick things off in race number 1. First today at Hawthorne is, this is funny. I have the Wednesday racing form, but for a minute I was confused because up at the top of the page it says Tuesday. But I rechecked, and it is the Wednesday form. The opener today, a 12-5 conditional claimer, non-winners of 2 lifetime. These are 3-year-olds and up, going 6.5. What are your thoughts on the opener?
Well, the reason I wanted to start with the opener is this does start with the start of the place pick 9, but also it starts with the 50-cent pick 5, and I think you have a chance at a single here with WW Concerto. This is a 2-horse in this spot, and the reason being, this horse drew an outside post in a route race over the weekend and actually scratched out of that spot for here. You find an easier spot, and usually when we come back off a little bit of a break, off a couple of days, the track just seems to hold speed a little bit more, and it's basically with how the track maintenance crew handles the track during the dark days. But a horse like WW Concerto going back to a sprint, you look back 3 starts back, this horse broke his maiden on the front end, well sprinting, and I do think that's the type of trip you see today. So I really like WW Concerto, and I'm actually going to single on this one to start out the card.
And I have to admit, I am not really familiar with the place pick 9. I've seen a similar bet, I think, out in Southern California. I'm guessing it lives up to its name. For 9 races, you have to pick a horse that finishes either first or second?
Exactly, and that's what it is. And it's a wager here that has built some pretty good carryovers in time. You have some days where you're looking at 10, 15,000 in a carryover. But the cool thing about it is even on the days where you don't have a carryover going into it, you're looking for a small dollar amount, a $300 or $400 payout, and that's kind of what we like about it. But Place McNine's actually been pretty popular here in the Chicago area.
All right, and we'll take a look also out at race number 5 this afternoon. Optional claimer starter allowance, the $8,000 level on the claiming side, 7 on the starter allowance side of things. These are 4-year-olds and up, going 1.70 miles.
Yeah, and this is the last race of the early pick 4 and the pick 5, and I really like the 6 Rain Ray in this spot. And it's interesting because the horse comes in off the claim into the barn of Ray Tracy, but what I really like is when a horse is claimed, it keeps the same rider who's been familiar with this runner. And Rain Ray was sprinting in those last couple of efforts, and really a game effort in that last start out because the horses that beat were pretty solid, and one for Biscuit, who was one of them that this horse defeated, came back and actually won going away in that one's next start out. But the way this race sets up, Martyr for the Cause is stepping up, but this horse will be sent away from the rail. I have to figure Rain Ray's probably just going to sit just off the pace in here because Rocket Professor likely goes too, and it just seems like the pace sets up. So I'm actually going to single on the front end of the pick 5, single on the last end of the pick 5, and then have the ability to spread in between.
Sounds good. I like it. Rain Ray, number 6 in race number 5. Let's go out to the 8th this afternoon at Hawthorne. It is a money allowance event. These are fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. They'll go 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah, and I want to give you 3 horses to look at here. The 1, Gambler 5, the 2, A Shot Away, and the 4, Distant Mesa, and all for different reasons. Distant Mesa is a horse that's going to be winging it from the get-go and should be able to actually grab the lead and open up. Then you're going to look at a horse like A Shot Away, who's probably going to lay there second and try to kind of grind it out late, and this is a horse that really has been decent here at Hawthorne. And then Gambler 5 has been in really good form in 2 starts against second-level allowance company, and they're choosing this spot over the possibility of taking on state-bred stakes sprinters this weekend. And Gambler 5, a nice effort in that last start, because that was a pretty decent field, too. But for me, I'm going to play an exact the box amongst those 3. I'm going to toss out Silky Sammy in here, who usually takes a lot of money. And I think between those 3, you can get a decent exacta, and that's the route I'll look.
All right. Boxing up the 1, 2, and the 4, and if the morning line odds hold up, should get a little bit of value there. 9-2, 3-1, and 5-1. So should be a little bit interesting there. And Jim, just let me ask you. You're talking about pace scenarios and whatnot. We're a little bit into the meet now at Hawthorne. Any biases or track playing pretty fairly?
You know what? You usually here, actually, when it's cooler out, you do get more of an inside bias and a front-end bias. As it starts to warm up, it evens out. And what we saw early in the meet was a whole lot of horses that were holding on the front end that actually were getting overbet as things warmed up, and horses were able to pick them off late at a little bit of a price. I would say today, with things warming up a little bit, there's a chance that it plays a little bit further back, but I still play horses that are at least on or near the pace today.
All right, very good. All right, as promised, we're going to take a look out at Saturday, a little early preview of the Illinois Derby, the big event out there at Hawthorne. A nice stakes day scheduled for Saturday. And obviously the highlight will be that Illinois Derby. And it got a little more interesting when Bob Baffert said he's going to send Midnight Hawk out there. And while we talk, Jim, I'm going to pull up the video going back to the Sunland Derby, the last start from Midnight Hawk. Midnight Hawk will be the number 7 here coming down the stretch, running second behind Baffert's stablemate Cheetu. Midnight Hawk now headed to the Illinois Derby. And Baffert has not made any commitment one way or the other. Might come out of the Illinois Derby and head to the Kentucky Derby. And with the date switch and point situation over the last couple of years, Illinois Derby may have become a little more of a prep for the Preakness, but could be an interesting player in the Kentucky Derby this year. So I'm sure you guys had to be very, very happy to see Bob Baffert make the commitment with Midnight Hawk. Pletcher potentially with a couple of horses in here as well. King Cyrus, one of his. You also have Bay of Plenty potentially for Kieran McLaughlin. Really looks like a fun field shaping up on Saturday.
Yeah, and let's touch first on Midnight Hawk, because you look at some of the horses and some of the races that this horse has been running. You chased California Chrome out in California. Then you came back 2 weeks later and chased Cheetu in the Sunland Derby. And that race at Sunland, that was a day where they turned into the lane, and they turned into really an imposing headwind in there. And they usually tends to play more towards horses on the front end. But you're right. You look at this race, and Midnight Hawk's going to be a heavy favorite in here. But the thing about it, they came back to run in the Sunland Derby on 2 weeks rest, so there's no telling what's going to happen out of this race. But I do expect that you're going to see a good performance. And really for us, the kind of cool thing about having the horse here is you have Chicago Blackhawks ties, because Coach
Right.
Quinville is one of the owners. Mike Kitchen, the assistant coach for the Blackhawks, is one of the owners on the horse. Mike Tice, who was an offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears and now works for the Atlanta Falcons, is one of the owners on this horse. And we're kind of hoping that you get that Blackhawks double, because the Hawks play St. Louis about 3 hours before our race in Game 2 of the playoffs, and then Midnight Hawk runs. So, I mean, for local impact, you really want to see a good effort out of this horse. And Midnight Hawk will be a very heavy favorite, but like you mentioned, Pletcher's looking at the possibility of having 1 or 2 in here, and you just saw what he did in the Arkansas Derby last week. And then Bay of Plenty is a really interesting horse, because this one's just coming in off a maiden breaker. But that was a really strong race, a really big number, and you tend to wonder how much of that is due to having speed on the inner dirt at Aqueduct, or if the horse is just kind of coming around now. So Bay of Plenty, if they're in this race, really kind of an interesting horse, because I think that's the one that could probably make your best run at a horse like Midnight Hawk.
Yeah, and again, you also have a Cassie horse with dynamic impact, class leader from Neil Howard. But Bay of Plenty, before that big maiden breaker, he'd run second down at Gulf Street, or run fourth, but a close-up fourth in only his second career start behind Ring Weekend, who subsequently went over to Tampa and won. So Bay of Plenty with only 3 career starts right now. Absolutely very, very interesting. And again, shaping up to be a fun Illinois Derby on Saturday. But that's only one of the stakes stakes on the card, correct? You have a full stakes card, 3 or 4 underneath?
4 stakes total. We have the Grade 360 Sales handicap for fillies and mares, and that's going to go 2 turns. That's looking like you're probably going to have a field of 7 or 8 in there. Horses like Dressed Apart, Imposing Grace in there, Ana Lucia, Sonia's Angel, and really could be a nice race. And then a pair of state-bred sprint races that are both worth $100,000, and we're going to have a 10-race card. We should be on the turf as well, so you're looking at a lot of quality full fields for the weekend, and hopefully nice weather. And for us, when I say nice weather, 50 degrees and dry would be good enough.
And those will get pulled today, correct?
Yeah, we're drawing those today. They're taking entries right now, and we'll have the races drawn probably in about 2.5 hours.
Excellent. So folks will be able to pull up those past performances and get a head start on the Saturday action at Hawthorne a little bit later this afternoon. Jim, as always, we appreciate the visit. We'll look forward to checking in with you next week and getting a little recap of the Illinois Derby. But good luck this afternoon. Again, we'll talk to you next week.
All right, thanks, Seth. Have a great week.
You too. Jim Miller of Hawthorne. A little bit earlier, we talked with Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com, and that all brings us to the end of Racing Across America. Did want to remind you, though, promotions and events coming up here at Capital OTB. I always like to keep you apprised because coming up this Friday, just a couple of days from now, if you are a patron of the Star Plaza branch, head on over on Friday. It's Fan Appreciation Day. Capital OTB Star Plaza branch this Friday, Fan Appreciation Day. Next couple of Saturdays on the website, there will be a Showviver contest. Don't forget, due to New York State law, we were closed this past Sunday. Palm Sunday will also be closed on Easter Sunday, so no racing or wagering available in New York State this coming Sunday, Easter Sunday. No programming on the network either. But a week from this Friday is the Fan Appreciation at the Star Plaza. A week from this Friday, right here at the Clubhouse Racebook, that's April 25th, it will be a $500 happy hour bankroll featuring none other than Tim Wilkin and Mike Jarbo of the Times-Union. The two that we square off with every summer at Saratoga, Capital OTB handicappers versus the Times-Union handicappers. And last summer OTB got off to a remarkable start. We thought we could coast home, and it wasn't that easy because Jarbo and Wilkin made it very interesting right to probably the last couple of days of the meet is when it finally got decided. But Wilkin and Jarbo in on April 25th with a $500 happy hour bankroll. As that gets closer, we'll certainly alert you a little more about that. And don't forget, you can always keep up with all the events and promotions by going to capitalotb.com. Again, that's going to wrap things up for this edition, the Wednesday edition of Racing Across America. We're here every Monday through Friday from 10 until 11 a.m. A little bit earlier, Anthony Mormino and I were on the Handicappers Report. We took a look at Keeneland and Aqueduct for this afternoon, just a couple of the tracks you'll be able to play. Hopefully we gave you some good information, so enjoy the races, cash a few tickets. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off-Track Betting.